Hi, everybody. I hope that everybody's doing well today. The weather is it's just really been kind of spectacular, actually, in the last 24 hours. I think, it's like the cool of Hong Kong cool of autumn is in the air, and also the bright sunshine. So thank you for joining us today. I'm Lucy Jordan. I'm one of the professorial staff here in the Department of Social Work and Social Administration, and one of the co-directors of the new HKU-UBS SSILP project. We're really excited to have you come to this fourth of a taster series that we're running. The taster series itself has 5 sessions, the fourth one is on evidence-informed decision-making. So we have invited, as is kind of our standard practice, a couple of panelists from the field. So we have Dr. Karen Hui, who is the director in the rehabilitation area at the Hong Kong Society for Rehabilitation. We also have Mr. Charles Ho, who is the project director in social housing from the Hong Kong Council of Social Service. We are going to be exploring the topic of evidence-based decision-making through the perspective of these experienced NPO leaders. But of course, we'll also be sprinkling in a few ideas from the more scholarly and academic perspective during the discussion part of the session today. So I'm going to introduce as well Professor Amy Chow, who is our head of department here and another one of the co-directors. And she is, in my view, one of the most qualified people in our department, actually, I think, to talk about evidence-based practice. And I think she has a few words of welcome, and then we'll move on to our panelist sharing session. So Professor Chow.
So you want me to start first?
Sure. I don't know if you just want to say, just say a few words. Yeah. And then we can go right into the panelists. Yeah.
Let's go directly to the 2 panelists, and then I will give a summary of the insight. Thank you.
Okay, great. So Karen, let's kick off with you, please.
Okay, thank you. So firstly, thank you for the invitation to present and share our experience of Hong Kong Society for Rehab about the evidence-based practice and decision-making. I share my PowerPoint first. Okay, you can see it, I hope. So today, I'm more from an NGO perspective on how we incorporate the evidence-based practice and decision-making in the NGO. Some of you may know about Hong Kong Society for Rehab. So let me briefly introduce to you. So the Hong Kong Society for Rehab established in 1959, I think it's almost 60 some years already. So our service is mainly for people with disabilities and chronic illness. So we have over 30 service units in Hong Kong and mainland China. And I think this is very important because why we implement evidence-based practice and decision-making is because we have quite a variety of service units in Hong Kong and China. So how we do the knowledge management and how we make the knowledge which can be transferable between different units is a critical issue for us. So firstly, I want to share that in fact, evidence-based practice is a key strategy in Hong Kong Society for Rehab from 2017 to 2020. So you can see our strategic goal is to strengthening of research and advocacy to foster an inclusive and enabling environment. And we have here highlight very important is because we want to do more advocacy with evidence-based research and participation. So this is one of our vision and mission, and we incorporate this in our key strategy. So frankly speaking, when I joined the society, I think one of the surprise or one of the unit that I think very important and which make me proud is we have a Center on Research and Advocacy, which is a unit established in 2012. And so the unit is not very large, but we have some staff here who is mainly to help to drive the improvement of service quality especially in exploration of innovative service model in our society, and so as to reflect the needs of persons with disability and chronic illness. So here is a framework for all of you to have a look. So when we, in our platform, when we start to formulate of questions and problems, we are also concerning how we gather data and information for service development, and also how we evaluate the outcomes. And this is also for the purpose of service monitoring and advocacy. So we have the team to help our frontline social worker or rehab staff to formulate the question and identify different of data required and different analysis methods. For example, the measure for the question and explore possible analysis method and evaluation of existing data. Here we have two approaches which help us to gather the information. The first approach, we call it conventional research approach, which I think many of us will know it is about research and evaluation. And the second approach, which is we are now using and trying to explore more, is the data science approach. That is how we gather the data from our service unit so that we can have a more data-driven decision making. So hopefully through these two approaches, we will have more evident information to facilitate our discussion of the funding and further planning of our service development. So firstly, I want to share with you about the conventional research approach. And the question is why to apply is when we want to evaluate the effectiveness and the impact of service, or when we want to explore the needs of our target population, or we develop instruments, because sometimes some of the instruments will be developed by ourselves. So we need to do some benchmarking and localize some instruments to measure the service outcome or explore the new service development. And we try to recommend some developmental strategies. So at the time when we have not enough data from our existing service, we will try to analyze and generate some evidence to support our decision making. So in we call it conventional research approach, just like in academic field. So our staff and our team will conduct the following procedure, just like literature review, to benchmark the model in international level, and we have some study design. We have questionnaire or qualitative or quantitative study, and we have data analysis and report writing. For example, in our service about community-based stroke rehab service, by using, we call it ISEF model, International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health. So some of you may know that if you are in rehabilitation field, which is now promoted by WHO. So we want to explore the possible application of ISEF model in stroke rehab. So what we do is that we sharing of the findings with frontline service team. That means in the international findings, that how to develop the service framework and standardize of the assessment tools, and also to support the development of case management approach, and also how to conduct the outcome evaluation. So we will have some regular review with the outcome data and discuss with the team on how to have continuous service enhancement. And the second example is about our service and for the chronic patients in Hong Kong, and also because we do develop different service, so we try to gather some of the information from the census, and our team will do secondary data analysis, and to do, you can see from the, to do some portrait and the visualization of results in self-help dashboard, so that all the staff can extract the information and insights according to their service needs. And when we have conduct these conventional research, what we are doing now is we have some study reports to identify or to generate the findings, and also we have some general publications and to report back how we validate some of the measurement tools and also our analysis on some of our program. And sometimes we will conduct press conference for advocates when we do all this conventional research, so that we can have a more evidence-based information to provide to government or different stakeholders on how we expect there is a change of the policy level. So as mentioned, we have conventional research approach. The second approach we use now is the data science approach. So why we use this approach is because we want to have a best utilize of available data to investigate some of the insights and facilitate our evidence-based decision-making. And the most important is because we want to develop a more data-driven culture and practice. So usually the data is available in the current administrative or operation database and stored in digital format. So we have some well-designed database that can fulfill this purpose. And the question or problems are usually related to service monitoring and some of the review from management perspective or some of the high-level service planning. So how to apply on this data science approach? We will facilitate the formulation of various research questions with our managerial staff, and we will gather the data from various sources of database and analyze the data and portray the data in the management dashboards. And we will do some automation of the process of this data collection, analyze data updates, and the enhancement. There's an enhancement of data storage and management practice. So you can see from this graph, our team will extract data from various databases because we have different service units across Hong Kong or mainland China. So we will have different service administration database, and then sometimes we extract some data from different reports. And what we do is we consolidate the data in a warehouse. We call it warehouse for further analyze. And then we visualize the result in the management dashboards so that our managers can use these dashboards to help portray or to interpret the information for facilitate their decision making. This is one of the dashboard cap screen. So you can see when the managers, they can go into the dashboard and then to review the number of service users in different units, and so that they can have the profile, just like the age rank and some of the basic information of these service unit. So finally, and looking forward, what in our society we want to do is, because in the coming 5 years, when we discuss our strategic plan, we want to adopt some global perspective to develop localized model. And most important, we want to do more knowledge development for service development level. So in order to benchmark our model with some global research, it's very important that we gather data and evidence information to consolidate the information for benchmarking. And also we want to use stage of data and technology to enhance our service outcome and efficiency so that all our colleagues can be more easy to access all these data for their service development. And most important, we also want to continue our advocacy for the people with disability and health conditions, which is supported by the evidence-based research. And finally, I want to acknowledge my manager in the team so that he helped me to prepare this PowerPoint. So I think this is my brief presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Karen. That was, yeah, there were so many different things in there, I think, that are really pertinent and relevant, to practice, obviously from the wealth of experience that you have, but also I think to, some of the conversations in, in the scholarly debates as well, which, you may also be aware of from your background and training, as you mentioned earlier, which we didn't know that you were an alumni from the department. So Charles, why don't we come to you and hear your perspective, and then we can have more, of a conversation, together after we have the two perspectives from the field and sharing. So it's over to you, please.
Okay. Thank you for invitation. Thank you for inviting me to these sharings. Today, I will talk about our experience of the social housing, and which is related to the evidence-based decision-making. And you can call me Charles. I'm coming from the Hong Kong Council of Social Service, and I'm responsible for the research and advocacy for the social housing. And today, let me introduce our organization first, because when we're making the management decision relating to our project, actually we have a different organization consider, have different perspective, may have different consideration to making what they should do, what they should not do. So before introducing our project, I will introduce our organization. Actually, our organization is a federation and has over 500 agency members, and they provide social service for those in need and over the Hong Kong territory. And we aimed at driving the impact-oriented and collaborative and innovative social service sectors. And we also using an approach to building the collaboration or co-creation platform and engaging the stakeholder to improving the well-being of Hong Kong community. So, so our approach of the organization is not to provide direct service for its own sake. We actually rely on the providing the direct service to doing the advocacy. So before we doing the advocacy, normally we will identify the service and also the policy gap, and then make reference to the existing services. And if the existing service is very variable and very good for the beneficiaries, we may consider to scale up the existing service with a collaboration with other NGOs. Or if there is no good existing service, we will create new service to tackle those very serious problems. Okay. So, and then the third dimension is that normally when we provide the so-called service, we engage our agency members and other professionals to build a kind of the platform to advance our issues, to provide the service for the beneficiaries. And at the same time, we also very focus or concentrate on the evidence-based research, and be using the research to justify what we should do, what kind of the policy measure we should advocate. So we quite emphasize the evidence-based research. So this is kind of our approach. And I'm reflecting on what kind of the evidence normally we use in our making a management decision. Normally, those evidence or valid information actually coming from the first-hand research, such as we conduct a lead assessment of the subdivided flat tenant, or we doing a second-hand research. For example, we are doing the research on intellectual experience of social housing or private rental housing market, and then generate some of the policy proposal. So this is one type of the evidence. And then sometimes we will have some of the focus group and know more vivid experience of our tenant, our beneficiaries. So this is the second type of the evidence. And then the third type of evidence, normally we draw from our project evaluation or experience, and so that we got some of the data on our evaluation and then make this our story with the evidence. And then lastly, we will have actually the Hong Kong Council of Social Service has quite a number of the committees. For example, specialized committee, policy research committee, standing committee. Those committee actually engage our agency members from Hong Kong, and then normally we sharing our frontline experience of a particular issue or particular experience, particular service, and then collect some of their views, their first experience of their beneficiary, and then we formulate our research question or formulate our the social concern we have to address in this or 2 years. So the 4 types of evidence actually coming from our frontline workers or some of the professional or user. Actually, this sort of experience are connected based in our institutional procedure. Okay, and then what kind of the decision normally we made? I'm thinking reflect. Normally, we are our decision is around about should we tackle this issue? Should we do this project, or we should not do this project because some organizations have already put a lot of effort to it, so we should not do it. Or when we take initiative to doing some of the project, how do we do it? So there are a lot of decisions surrounded around this sort of the question, management question. Okay. So I'm trying to using one of our experience of the social housing project to illustrate how we using the information to support some of decision-making questions. Okay, so here you see there are 2 modular housing project. One is the Luncheon 220 in Sum-Shui-Po, that's here, and then the other one is also in Sum-Shui-Po, Yangzhou Street modular social housing. So, and we advocate the transitional housing and also build those housing for the tenants, for the grassroots family who are waiting for the public rental housing. That is our key project. Okay. Oh, sorry. So then one of the first question is, why did Hong Kong Council of Social Service decide to do housing advocacy? Choosing this housing as one of the main agenda as you want to advocate, and also advocate transitional social housing. So I remember that in 2012, actually be forming the housing working group, and this working group engage the different NGOs who are working on the interest of the tenant, grassroots tenant, and then they have some of the sharing and say that now the housing burden of the grassroots families are getting higher because the rent is increasing, and also they also will recognize that there are very poor living conditions because they are new form of the poor housing that is recorded subdivided flat. So those frontline workers discuss about this issue, and they think that we should address the interests of the grassroots family. And so we try to formulate, in that group, we try to formulate one of the research which is related to the impacts of the private rental market and also the private rental agency on the interest of the grassroots family. So there is one research actually was published at that time, and then we say that those private rental agency actually partly raise up the rent, and so the grassroots families bear the burden, and also the housing condition is very poor because the family is very small. Okay, so that is one of the information or evidence actually coming from this working group and the research. And so we think this is a very, very important issue we have to address, and not many organizations doing it. And then so we gather those NGOs with the same interest together, and then try to formulate our policy proposal. Okay, policy proposal. Okay, And the question too is that why did Hong Kong Council of Social Service provide transitional social housing and build those modular social housing? And during the period the period of 2014 to 2016, actually our housing working group formulate 3 housing proposal. One is the rent regulation, and then the second is the rent allowance, and then the third one is the transition housing. And we discussed about how to urge the government to adopt it, but eventually the government reject the rent regulation because rent regulation may raise up the cost, or no, rent regulation may discourage the owners from renting their subdivided flats to the grassroots family. So it will adversely affect the supply of the private rental housing unit. So the government is very hesitant to adopt this rental regulation. So one proposal is rejected, and then the other proposal is the rent allowance. They also think that the allowance may give additional benefits to the owners because they get the more rent from the allowance. So they don't think the rent allowance is feasible, and also they don't want to benefit those owners. So the last one is the transitional housing, and they also hesitate to adopt these housing measures because they think after the project of the transition housing is closing, then those people cannot or fail to go to the public rental housing will complain or doing social action against the government. So they don't want to adopt the transitional housing. And because of that, so we are also doing a kind of the research and also have a international trip to the Netherlands, Amsterdam, and then collect some of the information on the social housing and then the transitional housing. So we also doing this kind of the trip, have this international trip and also the second-hand research, and then mix up some of the example to persuade the government to using the modular or container housing to provide affordable housing for the poor people. And at that time, even though they do not prefer to build the transition housing, but actually in reality, there is one social enterprise provide the transitional housing. So we think that we can scale up this kind of the project, the program into a transition housing policy, and by building more modular housing or container housing, or try to engage more owners, the good owner, so-called good owner, who can provide the flat at a below the market rent. So we think that we can, using our credibility to attract more owners to provide the land or flat for us to doing this kind of a job. So we are also doing this sort of the research, consulting the different partners, owners, and also the social enterprise. And we think probably there is this kind of hidden supply of the housing in the market. And then we try to persuade, for example, the Urban Renewal Authority to provide their idle units for us to try this project. And at the same time, we also see that there are very few NGOs to directly provide the flat or the affordable housing for the people. So we think Hong Kong Council of Social Service may take up this role to connect those idle property or land to do this provision of the social housing. Okay, so we make the decision to provide the transitional social housing, even if there is some of the liability to manage those property and also tenant. So there is one of key management decision we have made. So here is one of examples of the container or modular housing from the Amsterdam. We're using this kind of the picture to persuade the public and also the government to adopt it. So we can call it, it is one of the evidence to persuade the ordinance. Okay. So the question is, why did the council decide to provide social housing, not merely transition housing? Transition housing is only affordable housing for a short term of lease. So the people only can stay in our housing for a short period of time, for example, 3 or 4 years. And then, but based upon our research on the international experience of social housing, and also we have a tradition in the community development. No matter scholar or the social worker, we emphasize the importance of the social capital to the poor. So we think that we should also provide a service for the tenant in our housing, so that we can facilitate them to build up their mutual help network, and then they can know more. Actually, they can know more social resources and have more information, and then they can share it and then support each other. So we have some of the data on the social capital research, some of the data on the interaction experience of social housing. So we think we should input the social dimension or the social service in all of the housing, and particularly into the transitional housing. So we call our housing is a social housing, not transitional housing. Okay. And then the question 4 we have made before: how did the council make transitional housing as affordable housing? Now we have already decided to make the transitional housing. And how did we do it? So first we make reference to the housing authority, and then how they should define the affordable rent, how they should define acceptable living size. So we're making the reference to the public rental housing template related to the rent determination housing standard. So we divide our rent level as not more than the maximum CSSA rental allowance, or the rental level is no more than 25% of their household income. Okay, so this kind of it is one of the very important decision making on how to divide the affordable rent. Also, we think that our housing cannot accommodate a lot of the people and become another type of subdivided flat. So we make reference to the public rental housing standard, and if the size is too small, and then the public housing tenant can apply for the changing the effect. So so they have one of the criteria of the minimum living space, okay, per person, that is 7 square meter. So we're using this 7 square meter as a minimum living space for transitional social housing. So we're doing this sort of the research, and then design our so-called affordable housing. Question 5, how did we engage the NGO to collaborate in our transitional social housing? At that time, because the transport and housing bureau has mentioned that they will input 50 billion Hong Kong dollar into the transitional housing. Okay, and then this kind of the announcement actually attract a lot of the private companies, social enterprise, or unknown companies to say that they can provide this sort of the transitional housing. So we think we have to prevent some of the agency, some of the participants from joining this program, and then make those housing become like a subdivided flat. So we make reference to our procurement, okay, the standard procurement procedure, this sort of the system, and then build the pre-qualification system of the NGOs or pre-qualification system of operator, and then invite them to join. So there are two criteria become our pre-qualified operator. One is that they are the members of the Hong Kong Council of Social Service or the Trust, or they have an experience in the managing the hostel or working on the housing issue or community development projects related to the grassroots people. So if they match these two criteria, they will become qualified operator. And then when we have a housing project, each project may consist of 50 or 100 units. We will invite them to submit the service proposal, and then we set up the vetting panel, and then we engage the service representative or property management representative, and also the lawyers to join this panel to select the good proposal and the good operator to manage our project. So this sort of the system, actually we make reference to the procurement procedure. I think this is also a kind of evidence, okay, to justify how we build this system. Okay. And then the question 6, how does the council decide not to build any
Charles,
more?
I just want to suggest, sorry to interrupt, maybe about 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. Okay.
Yeah, okay, excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
2 more slides. Okay.
Okay, great.
And then the last 2 questions is that when does the Hong Kong Council not to build any more modular social housing? And after these 2 years, we found that previously we think there is a service gap, policy gap there, because not much NGO provide the affordable housing for the poor people. Now you see that a lot of the NGO are willing to provide the modular housing for the people. So we think that now we made a good time for us to withdraw from this area and continue another jobs. So there is one kind of the observation, and we see that, and we think that we have already finished our mission on this housing advocacy on the transitional housing. And then the second one is that we think some of the project is not financially sustainable. Actually, we have to build our income and expense, okay, budget, expense budgets, and then we will check whether the small project is sustainable or not. And some of the projects actually are rejected by us. So this is also a kind of the information actually based upon our previous experience on income and expense, and also the cash flow, and then make the decision. Okay, the last one. Okay, the last one. What kind of the challenge we encounter to create this kind of the evidence for decision making? Normally, we have to have some of the manpower and also the money or engage the academia and also the professional to build or create this kind of the evidence. So if we cannot have sufficient money to create to doing the policy evaluation or policy social impact assessment, then actually we cannot collect more data to justify what kind of the new project we are going to advance. So we have to think about how to build the data connection in our practices, but it is quite difficult for us because our team actually is to implement the project instead of having a lot of time to think what kind of the information actually we think it is very important. We have to connect it. So we need some of the helper or some of another team member to support it. So it is also one of the difficulty we encounter in the practice to try to build the data structure into our practice. Okay, so that is the last difficulty is because our project is collaboration with the pilot. We also need to persuade our partners to provide the information on their activities, their talents to us. So they also think that this kind of the data connection will increase their workload and cannot provide us punctually, take a lot of the time to connect those information, but sometimes we cannot connect it. So that is also one of the difficulty we met in this kind of the collaborative projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charles. Yeah, it's really interesting to learn more about the project, but also I think what was quite interesting too, is just a sort of different perspective about, an organization such as the council that's more of kind of an umbrella organization, but the different ways that kind of identifying a problem, through actually collecting evidence then informs the decision making, about what kind of approach should be taken, and then the ongoing monitoring and evaluation. So there's a lot of different points there, about how evidence, is informing the whole process, and also some of the challenges, that are being thrown up in how it's unfolding. Yeah. So I think, Professor Chow, let me move to you now. I think you're going to connect the dots a little bit for us all, and then we can go into Q&A.
Okay, let me further complicate you with the concept, because this is not only a practice seminar. We also want to bring some ideas about the background, the theory, but I won't keep you long. So it is the time for you to think about questions to discuss. Now, when we look at the topic, evidence-based practice and also evidence-informed decision, what are they? Now, I need to share with you that originally, this is not with a long history. It is since 1992 when the medical field started to talk about evidence-based. Now, before that, we trust expert, we trust intuition, we trust your experience. But since 1992, the medical field started to think that we need some data and some systematic way to collect the information. Now, but if you take a look at it, even for the psychology, psychiatry, and social work, it is just a recent history, have a history of 2 decades of development. And recently, this movement had moved to business field and also other philanthropy field in the recent year. And the key point is it is hoped to de-emphasize the intuition, the systematical clinical experience. So that's why we need a framework to work on the data. Now, but the term evidence-based or even evidence-informed practice is misleading, a lot of people say it is none of my business because I'm not a researcher. I can't do research. Let the university take the lead. But if you look at the historical paper, when they talk about evidence-based, it is not only about the data, not about research designed only, but they also take into account the clinical expertise, which they put in the middle, which is very important. So if you are a practitioner, if you are policymaker, if you are funders, you are still the leaders, you are still the heart of the evidence-informed practice or evidence-informed evidence-based practice. And also, we place our recipient clients and also the clinical circumstances as the background, at the context. They care equally with the evidence. Now, so that's why it echoes strongly with Charles' elaboration. It is not only about research data, but also the clinical experience, focus group, and even the daily encounter with the service recipient are part of evidence. Now, but I also want to emphasize that this is a process. It is not only about evaluation, but it is also about evidence-informed how to shape our practice and policy. And you can see it is a process. It is a long process. So that's why our university keep on moving with practice research, because one research finish, complete, we have a new idea, we will have a new product, and we need research continuously. So it is a collaboration between partners of research, clinician, policymaker, and government. Recently, the medical field also introduced the evaluation framework, giving us another dimension, which Charles also mentioned, is the financial dimension. A lot of time we say we have certain kind of project, certain kind of policy, products, but we don't know what exactly is the outcome. But even when we have the outcome, we also concern about what are the longer term of impact. Can it have a ripple effect that makes a difference? So these are all questions need to answer. Now, more importantly, because I'm coming from a medical background, I will also highlight some knowledge from that side to add further thoughts, food of thoughts for you. They emphasize the importance of taking note of mechanism of change. That is what theory explain that the change can happen. That part is important. And also take note of the context. Some policy are applied very well in a certain context, but may not be applied to the others. And we also need to know what works for which group. And we had to identify the moderator and to know what circumstances will make our effects the highest. So these are the models that they approach. Now, I'm so grateful to our team members who do a little bit of search for us how the evidence-informed, evidence-based practice is emerged to evidence-informed practice. So you can see that the process is actually more emphasizing on the process, which Charles has been doing a lot, and also the cognitive process, how you make and come up with decision. And also it is an interactive process, which means you need to interact with different stakeholders. And this approach has been used in the management field, has been used in the recent philanthropy field, and also in a lot of NGOs, not only in research, but they also find that grant making, if for those NGOs who are applying for funding, you now see that most of the funding requirement also include the evaluation and also the evidence providing team in the budget to let you put into the ideas of what can be the mechanism of change, how effective it is. So these are some data which if you want to know, we can pass the PowerPoint to you later on. And in addition, risk management in particular after the pandemic, you can also see that research are coming up along this line because you need to make the benefit across the risk and to make rational decision. So these are all the current application of evidence-informed practice or evidence-informed decision-making. Now, so in a nutshell, I would like to make some final conclusion. Take-home message. First of all, remember, evidence is not restricted to research. All forms of clinical expert or your clinical experience are included. It is aggregate in form of one piece of evidence. And secondly, it is a process. It is not a one point and then you just second some agency to do a research for one time. It is actually a continuous process. And learn from Karen, you also see that no need to start the research. You can always go back to your data, your clinical files, what the profile they are. That can be a very important first piece of research. Most important of all, it contains all the data. It is unbiased data. So we can also take a look at what we have at our own place first. And lastly, why we need to spend energy, time, resources for it? Because resources are scarce. So what we need to do is to make sure the policy, the practice we are doing are efficient and also effective. Last but not least, when you do not have enough resources, we need to use this data and evidence to inform why we have priorities like this and not supporting other service. Now, I hope this brief summarization will offer you some ideas, but more important of all, I really hope to hear from you when evidence-informed decision-making is not only applied in social housing, rehabilitation, and medical setting. What are your experience? What are the things that you want to bring up to discuss? And we are happy to use the remaining time to cover that part. May I pass back to you, Lucy? Thank you.
Sure, great. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Amy. So yeah, we have just a few minutes, about 5 minutes or so, for some questions or, for some sharing too, I guess, about your own experiences as well, with evidence-based practice or decision-making or the lack thereof, right? I mean, it could be, about kind of a gap or a challenge that you experience as well. And also I do want to note, Karen she has to move on to another meeting. I think that's right at 1:30. So she's going to leave in a couple of moments. So if anybody in particular has a question they want to direct at Karen, I encourage you to ask it now. We're always happy to have questions come in the chat if you're more comfortable with that. Sometimes people are a little bit. But yeah, the time is open now for the participants to raise any questions or comments that you'd like to share. It's always quiet until somebody asks a question. It's the phenomena observed. An unusually quiet group.
We collect some evidence instead, asking who had been using some of your existing data to inform your practice. So you can raise your hand, you can indicate in the chat so that we can have a taste of how often you really use evidence to make your decision. Haha, no.
Like I said, it's an unusually quiet, an unusually quiet group of people today. One of the other topics that I think we thought was an interesting angle that we didn't get to have somebody so specifically share about is how donors use evidence and think about evidence, because I think we focus quite a bit on and look at, there's William representing SF Family Foundation. Yeah, I don't know, William, do you have any? Would you be willing to share a few words about your perspective about how donors think about evidence of a practice?
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. I think evidence is very important for us, for a donor as well, to understand what kind of our donation is effective, as well as what the target group we need to provide. For example, for our foundation, when we start, we have still did a landscape study of our target people, and then after that we do a survey with the caregiver or the mentally disabled person so we understand what kind of needs and what are the problems they are facing. So when we donate the money, when we funding our partner, we can target partner that will have specific experience, as well as when they discuss with the program with us, we know exactly what our target audience will be needed and what kind of service they will be much more effectively to help them to provide the service as well. So evidence is very important as well. Another thing is also when we during the process, just like Charles said, we need to collect different data as well from the evaluation or from the observation of the service or the project. So we can collect those data to see how we can improve the program as well, and also to see what kind of resources we can further provide, or what kind of resources, not only in case of money, but also in case of talents, or in case of practice, or in case of social networking as well. So for example, one of the project we helping, we partner with NGO. We do give them when they have problem and they find out or some issue, and then from the evidence we so-called collected, we're helping them to sort out by collect with other partner, other NGO. For example, like they find out that they may have a transportation problem, so so we collect with like Diamond Cap or other social enterprise to see how we can work together, and also with the data they provide, we can see how effective it is sort out the problem as well.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, because I think it's a really important part of kind of the puzzle, right? This idea about, so Charles was talking, actually Karen talked some about this too, about, how like evidence that you generate is used for advocacy purposes, but it's also used, right, for communication purposes. So for example, say, in other, like advocacy is a form of communication, right? But communicating to donors about, about like what you want to do with their money, so also it's a way of like building trust, we could say kind of, in donors, like in the capacity, to deliver, but also, in the match to the service. Thank you very much for being willing to be on the spot too, William. And you see, then a shy sharer came up with the question, right? Because that's what always happens once somebody starts to talk. And Olive, it's an excellent question about, that we have data in our service operation day to day, and any suggestions about how to do better data collection for evidence analysis. And I'm noting we have like 2 minutes, but one thing I wanted to say is that to me, I think that is such a great question, because I think like Karen especially illustrated that, I think about how there's so much information, right? And so much data that you have that you generate from like your own programs, but also that you collect, maybe to help contextualize whatever the topic is that you're studying. But, it's like, how is it linked, say to your overall strategic planning, for example, how is it linked, directly to your mission, so, like, and, Amy passed through that quickly, like your theory of change, right? And, the type of evidence then that you're gathering, and how you're processing it and how you're using it. And I think that kind of a skill, and it is a skill, right? I mean, those are skills that we can learn how to do, through practice, through mentorship, through talking with our peers, about, kind of those challenges that we're facing. So I wish I could give you like a simple magic pill about it, right? But I can't, but I can definitely say that it is something that together we can learn how to do better. And, that I hope that we'll have the opportunity to dive into that some in the future. Yeah. And then I see, oh, go ahead, Amy, please.
Just a very brief conclusion. The
Yeah.
first starting point is never take the data as like a statistics you need to report as administrative duties. Take it as something informational. And 1 year, 2 year, you need to aggregate them and just print out the descriptive statistics and take a look at it. What are something that catch your attention? Are there something not in line with your expectation? Start from that piece, and I do think you will find something interesting to dwell on. And also keep asking one question. Do I need all the information? Should I simplify the data collection process and make this less burden for the frontline, for everyone? And then they may be more eager to pay attention to how to use the evidence. I think a lot of time you just fill in the form and you never take a look at it. So it is not useful anymore. So that is my hunch to remind. And maybe we can have some university and frontline collaboration. Maybe we can also have our students who are taking the research course to work in collaboration with you and see whether we can help in some of the data analysis as well. That may be a good project. Sorry for interrupting, Lucy.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no, I know. And I'm sorry we've run out of time, but I see other people chiming in about how important the theory of change is, which is kind of, what I started, elaborating on a bit there as well, about how that's really linked up, to, kind of drive everything, right, that you're doing, not just your operations, but also, the strategic planning, and then how you're, reporting on things as well. So, so thank you everyone for joining us during your lunch hour. Thank you, Charles, for coming and sharing, and Karen in absentia because she's already left. And we really look forward to seeing everybody in our next session, which will be on the first Tuesday of November. Usually we're on the first Tuesday, but since it was a holiday last Tuesday, we rescheduled to today. And in that session, we're going to be discussing sustainability. I'm sorry about my stuttering to get it out of my mouth there. And really have some really interesting speakers lined up, and hope that we'll see all of you and perhaps some of your colleagues as well at the session next month. So thanks again for joining us today, and thanks to everyone that made this a very insightful session.
Thank you, Lucy.